If you're like me, one of your dreams is to one day work on Broadway on that sweet, sweet production contract. And today, we're going to learn how to make this happen.
My name is Claudia Lynch, and this is your half-hour call. Good evening, everyone. This is your half-hour call. Half hour, please. This evening, you'll be speaking with Claudia Lynch about stage managing. Half hour.
Alrighty, friends, we are back with another episode of Half Hour Call. Today we're talking to my friend and mentor, Claudia Lynch. Claudia has been a stage manager for 27 years and has worked on so many Broadway shows, some of which that you might recognize are Rock of Ages, Light in the Piazza, and Little Shop of Horrors, and so many others. Stick around till the end of the video because we're going to talk about the number one avoidable mistake that Claudia sees young stage managers making in the market today. Thank you so much for being here. I'm super excited to get to talk to you about how to get from college to Broadway.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Once you graduated and got that ridiculously expensive piece of paper, how did you use that to get to where you are today?
Well, I'm going to talk about a little bit about the phrase, it's who you know in the theater. You'll probably hear that constantly, right? I got an internship at the Porthouse Theater Company. I was not an equity member, but I worked with an equity stage manager for the first time. And I proceeded to sort of follow him around for the next couple of years. I followed him and became a production assistant at the Cleveland Playhouse for a year. But at the end of that year, I wanted to be back in New York. And I met an equity stage manager there, Janet Takami, who I said to her, I'm a stage manager. I want to be a stage manager. I'm starting out. And she said to me, well, there's something called the Director's Lab at Lincoln Center Theater. You should send your resume there. And they were hiring for something they called the Director's Lab. And the production manager looked at my resume, and Josh Friedman, who was the equity stage manager that I had followed around for 2 years, was on the list on my resume. And she had worked with Josh in Ohio and said, well, I need somebody quick, and this person at least has a reference from someone I know, so I'll call her. And I got my first job in New York for the Lincoln Center Theater Directors Lab from that connection. I didn't even know about the Directors Lab if I hadn't met Janet, and then I got the job because I had Josh's name on my resume. They were going to have a show come into their Mitzi Newhouse Theater, and it was a new dance play called Contact. Susan Stroman and John Weidman were creating it. And so there was a stage manager, Tom Woodman, who got my name from the production managers at Lincoln Center because I had done the Director's Lab for 2 summers. And he asked me to interview for a PA position. I got the job. I got offered the job, one of 2 production assistants. The day before opening night and the last day on contract, they asked me to stay as a long-run PA. So basically, I was still a production assistant. I wasn't on an equity contract, but I was the 4th member of the stage management team. And I stayed for the entire run of Contact. So all told, it was 3 years and my first Broadway show. But I was not on an equity contract and did not become an equity stage manager until the end of that run. Now, a newly minted equity stage manager, but I had been on a Broadway show for 3 years, basically, at that point. I was lucky enough to then be able to sort of continue my career. In fact, Lincoln Center Theater really gave me my start because they turned around and asked me to come back and be the second assistant for a show called Dinner at 8. On that show, I met Karen Armstrong and Adam Hunter. For the next basically 15 years, worked either for Lincoln Center that they would call me, or I would follow Adam around for the next number of years. And really can trace my entire career back to that beginning. So I like to say that I'm actually a career ASM. I actually prefer being an ASM first, but I like being a PSM. I'm happy to do it, but my joy is being the first. So my first PSM gig really was, we did a show called A Catered Affair. And we were doing our out-of-town tryout at the Old Globe in San Diego. Adam and John had to be in the Sweeney Todd rehearsal, and then John Doyle had to be in the A Catered Affair rehearsals directing. So I was PSMing the out-of-town tryout for A Catered Affair while Adam directed the national tour of Sweeney Todd. but at the same time knowing that Adam would come in as the PSM of a catered affair when we moved to Broadway. A year later, I was asked to be the PSM of Rock of Ages when it started off Broadway at New World Stages. Did that show, we moved to Broadway, moved to the Brooks Atkinson Theater, and I stayed with that show until it closed the Brooks Atkinson Theater in 2011. I actually had to convince a few people when I then went to go for ASM gigs. And they were like, what are you doing? You know, like, are you really interested in this ASM gig when you've been a PSM? And I said, no, absolutely. Like, this is what I want. This is what I do.
So in the 27 years since you've started being a stage manager, how has this industry changed? And how would that change your approach if you had to enter the industry today?
When I went to start teaching for the first time, I asked that question to a bunch of my friends and colleagues. What do you look for when you're hiring a production assistant? And I was fascinated to find that there was a little bit of a generational divide in terms of stage managers. I have always looked for somebody who had a good attitude and had some instincts to be a good stage manager and could pay attention and could be ready to work. But when I talked to some of the stage managers I know who were just a bit younger than I am, what I found was that they were interested in the craft skills that the person came in with. I think that that's a divide, a generational divide. So the older the stage manager is that's hiring you as PA, they might be more willing to, this is a generalization obviously, but they might be more looking to teach you the craft on the job, where the younger stage managers who went through more specialized training in college might be looking for you to be able to show your craft skills.
Considering all of that, would you say that there is a single secret to success?
Yeah, I know this sounds like a cop-out, but be a good person. Like, really, I'm gonna tell you that I got jobs because people were like, yeah, she's good to have around, has good energy. I can be even more specific. When I was just out of college, I was a PA for a reading in New York City, and it was a workshop reading for Anna Devere Smith for a show called House Arrest, first edition. And they were doing a reading in New York for 2 weeks, and then they were going to Arena Stage in DC. And they had full year stage management interns in DC, but somehow they asked if I could go along. The production manager one time said to me that when they asked to bring you along, I realized that every time I saw you in rehearsal in New York, you were smiling. And so we decided that you had a good attitude, and why not bring somebody along who was always smiling, right? And then I'm going to tell you that I know the moment that I blew it with that production manager. I was sitting on the stage and somebody had put a spike mark down, and the spike mark was big and like just really big and really obnoxious. And I was like grumbling out loud to myself, like, this is just ugly. Like, there's no reason for this. There's no reason to be that big. I'm making it smaller. But I was cranky and I was grumbling out loud in the middle of the theater, and the production manager walked by and I was like, oh shit. But I just lost that impression that he had of me, of somebody who was just somebody good to work with. What I learned over the years is that I probably should have gone and said, you know what? I was just being really cranky out loud in the middle of the stage, and that's not professional. I shouldn't have done that. Like, I should have acknowledged that. The secret to success is really just being somebody that people want to work with.
What makes someone marketable for entry-level positions?
Having the right skill set for what you're going into, right? I think that when I'm teaching, I think that absolutely my students should learn how to call a show, right? But when they're starting out in this business as a production assistant, is their ability to call a show the most important craft skill that they can have? Absolutely not, right? They may not be calling a show for a couple of years. It is okay to not be good at everything. You have to be competent at everything that a stage manager needs to do. And what I mean, and I mean stage manager, I mean anyone on the stage management team. If you know what you want to do, go get yourself in the room to do it. Get yourself the connections. Go get yourself in the room and be working with the people that you want their jobs in 10 years. But at the same time, if you don't know what you want to do, or even if you do know what you want to do, you also want to be open to the opportunities that come your way. Don't turn down an opportunity because you're so hyper-focused on where you want to go. Like, you don't want to close yourself off to the opportunities that come your way, but you don't have to say yes to everything. One time I actually got offered a job to do a tour. I wasn't sure that it was going to take me where I wanted to go, right? At that point, and I talked to my mom about it. Basically, she said, take it if it works for you, but if you're feeling like it's not going to take you where you want to go, something else will come along. And I did. I turned it down. But that was scary, and I remember it to this day, right? 22 years ago, however long it was, that the idea of turning something down when you don't have something else coming along is scary, but sometimes that's what you need to do.
Specifically talking about Broadway, it seems like it's just this club where you have to have worked on Broadway to work on Broadway. It reminds me of that package of scissors that tells you that you need scissors to open the package of scissors. But if I had scissors, I would have opened the package already.
Yes.
What?
Yeah, I don't know that I have a good answer to that. The answer is that's how we use production assistants. And again, I will come from a background of in a Broadway situation where I have never been in a situation where the production assistants were expected to be stage managers. The production assistants that I worked with did not take the job of an equity stage manager. That is the way to get into the room and to get to know the Broadway process, and then to leave on opening night and to be able to maybe get your next gig and your next gig. Because ultimately, if stage managing in any situation is a skill that you have to have specific language and specific knowledge of the theater. And then when you become an equity member, you have to have specific knowledge of equity in order to be a stage manager. Well, on Broadway, you have to have knowledge of all of the other theatrical unions, right? You have to have the knowledge of how it works on Broadway, which is different in some ways because you are working with many other unions. And it's a multi-million-dollar company. As a stage manager, we are middle management, definitely, but we are still, the stage management team is in the room, in the rehearsal room or in the theater, and we have a responsibility to a multi-million-dollar company. The general managers, the producers are going to be wanting to make sure the stage management team they're hiring has that skill set, has that knowledge.
For people that don't know where they want to land, what are some things that they can do so they're not getting like pigeonholed? I
think the only way in some ways you are going to get pigeonholed, because pigeonholing, you are developing expertise. To specialize in your field, you're going to specialize even more so within the field, and it will feel like pigeonholing, but maybe it's more about specializing.
What are some of the biggest avoidable like pitfalls and mistakes that you see people making that they might not think are the mistakes that they're going to be making?
So one of the first ones, it's going to sound kind of facetious, but they can smell the fear. Like the more nervous you are, the more you're not confident in your abilities, the more you're like uptight or anxious or fearful about that beginning of your career. You're gonna put off an energy that is not calming, that is not conducive to collaboration, and people are going to get put off by that desperation. And then the other thing that we've talked about before, which is be able to make a mistake and correct it. Be able to not have a mistake be the end of your career, and you're the one who's going to make that happen. I've made so many mistakes over the course of my career, but I've also done some good things. And so what I learned from the time I was 18 to now at 45, I learned that if I make a mistake, just to own up to it, but also be aware of the severity. At the end of the day, it's not the end of the world, but you have to know that it's life and death. So again, with a little bit of like grim humor, when we were doing Rock of Ages on Broadway, if you finished a show as a stage manager, where you called a show or something, and it wasn't, you didn't feel like totally right in the pocket the whole time, and you were feeling a little off. Sometimes we used to joke that, well, I didn't kill anybody today, right? And it's sort of a grim joke because there are Broadway shows that you're calling that you could kill someone if you didn't call a good show. Having that balance, like anything, having the balance of take it seriously enough, but not so seriously that any variation will ruin your life. Really, the key to being a successful stage manager is to pay attention and be okay with what happens. Yeah.
That's lovely. That's lovely. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being here. It's been a wonderful 2 videos, and I'm sure I'll reach out to you for a few more later as I come across them. But thank you again. For those of you watching, thank you so much for watching. My name is Kent, and this has been your half-hour call. Do you have a question or an idea for a video? If you do, send me an email at askhalfhourcall@gmail.com. That's askhalfhourcall@gmail.com.